The star hauler drifted through space like an old tin can, its hull marked with patches and scars from 20 years of hard work. Inside the ship's worn bridge, Captain Jack pressed his hand against the cold metal wall and smiled. Others might see an outdated cargo hauler, but to him, she was home. "Captain, we've got another warning light," Tom called from his engineering station. The stocky engineer's face glowed red from the flashing alert on his screen. "Port thrusters acting up again." Jack ran his fingers through his gray-streaked hair and walked over to look at the display. "Can we make it to Watson's colony with it like this?" "She'll hold together," Tom said, already typing commands into his console. "Not pretty, but we'll get there. Always does." The bridge crew had heard this conversation 100 times before. Pete, their young navigator, didn't even look up from his star charts. Mary, handling communications, just adjusted her headset and continued monitoring the local channels. They all knew the star hauler wasn't much to look at, but she got the job done. The ship carried basic supplies to the outer colonies: medicine, machine parts, and those little comforts of home that made life bearable on the frontier. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid the bills. Barely. "Getting some weird readings here, Cap," Mary said suddenly, her forehead creasing with concern. "Lot of traffic on the emergency bands from the inner systems." Before Jack could respond, the ship's sensors began pinging wildly. Tom's fingers flew across his console. Multiple ships just dropped out of faster-than-light travel. Big ones, really big ones. The main viewport filled with light as dozens of massive vessels appeared in the distance. Their sleek hulls gleamed like polished chrome, making the star hauler look even more dated by comparison. They moved with an unnatural grace, their engines leaving trails of blue fire against the black of space. "Those aren't human ships," Pete whispered, his young face pale in the light of the strange vessels. Jack leaned forward, his hands gripping the edge of his command station. "Mary, get me a channel to Earth Defense Command. Now." "I'm trying, sir." Mary's fingers danced across her board. "But I'm getting nothing. All frequencies are being jammed. Even the old ones." The alien fleet grew larger in their viewport, more ships appearing every second. They weren't heading toward the star hauler. They were barely acknowledging the small cargo ship's existence. Their trajectory was clear. They were heading straight for Earth's core systems. "Tom, kill all non-essential systems," Jack ordered. "Make us look as dead as possible." The bridge lights dimmed, and the usual hum of the ship's systems faded to near silence. Through the viewport, they watched as ship after ship of the alien armada passed them by. Each vessel was a masterpiece of advanced technology, their hull designs unlike anything human engineers had ever achieved. A message suddenly boomed through their communication systems, broadcasting on all frequencies. The universal translator kicked in, converting the alien language to English. "To all primitive vessels, clear the space lanes. The Dominion comes to claim what is rightfully ours. Resistance is futile and unnecessary. Your technological inferiority makes you unworthy of notice. Submit, and you may continue your simple existence under our rule." Mary pulled off her headset, her hands shaking. "They're broadcasting this everywhere, every frequency, every channel." "Simple existence," Tom growled. "Primitive vessels. Who do these shiny bastards think they are?" Jack held up his hand for silence, watching the alien ships with narrow eyes. Not one of them had bothered to scan the star hauler. Their sensors had swept past the cargo ship as if it were nothing more than space debris. Their arrogance was obvious. They didn't consider human ships worthy of attention. "They think we're harmless," Jack said slowly, a plan forming in his mind. "They think we're too primitive to be a threat." Pete looked at his captain nervously. "Aren't we? Look at those ships, Cap. They're like something out of a dream. We're flying a rust bucket held together with patches and prayers." "Maybe," Jack said, a small smile forming on his weathered face. "But sometimes the oldest tools are the best ones. Tom, remember that modification you made to the engine last month? The one that wasn't exactly up to code. Tom's eyes lit up. The one using the old mechanical governor instead of the AI system. Yeah, saved us a fortune on parts. These new ships probably don't even have mechanical backups. They're all quantum this and AI that. Mary, what about that radio transmitter you kept even though command said to scrap it? The analog one. Mary straightened in her chair. Still works perfectly. Doesn't need any fancy programming, just good old radio waves. And Pete, Jack turned to his young navigator. You're the only one I know who can still plot a course without relying on the navigation eye. Pete nodded slowly, beginning to understand. Because my grandfather taught me how to use the stars themselves. Old school. Jack looked at each member of his crew, seeing the realization dawn in their eyes. The alien fleet might have dismissed them as primitive, but that very primitiveness might be their greatest advantage. The Star Hauler didn't need fancy quantum computers or AI systems to function. She worked on gears, levers, and human ingenuity, things the aliens might not expect or understand. Tom, power up the engine, but keep it quiet. Pete, plot us a course parallel to the alien fleet. Mary, see if you can find any frequencies they're not monitoring. And somebody wake up Bill in the cargo hold. Tell him we're going to need his crazy ideas about improvised weapons. The crew jumped into action, their movements now charged with purpose. The Star Hauler might be old, she might be ugly, but she was about to become humanity's secret weapon. The aliens had made their first mistake. They had underestimated both the ship and her crew. As the Star Hauler quietly came to life around them, Jack watched the alien armada through the viewport. They were so confident in their superiority that they didn't even notice the small cargo ship beginning to move. They didn't see the danger in its weathered hull or its outdated systems. They think we're primitive, Jack said quietly, more to himself than to his crew. Let's show them just how dangerous primitive can be. The Star Hauler turned slowly in space, its engines barely more than a whisper. Ahead of them, the Dominion fleet continued its advance, arrogantly believing that their sophisticated technology made them invincible. They didn't realize that they had just started a fight with the most resourceful and determined species in the galaxy. And they certainly didn't realize that the most dangerous weapon in space wasn't the newest, shiniest ship. It was a stubborn crew in an old cargo hauler with nothing left to lose. Tom's workshop in the belly of the Star Hauler looked more like a museum of forgotten technology than a spaceship's engineering bay. Old circuit boards hung from the ceiling on thin wires, and mechanical parts covered every surface. The engineer moved between his workbenches with practiced ease, his hands covered in grease. "It's not pretty," Tom said, holding up what looked like a combination of old radio parts and modern power cells. "But it works better than anything they'll expect." Jack picked up one of the modified devices, turning it over in his hands. "And you're sure their sensors won't detect these?" "That's the beauty of it," Tom grinned, wiping his hands on his already stained coveralls. "They're looking for quantum signatures, energy patterns, all that fancy stuff. This?" He tapped the device. "This is just basic electronics and mechanics. To their advanced sensors, it'll look like background noise." The ship's cargo hold had been transformed into a makeshift workshop over the last 3 days. Bill, their cargo specialist, had torn apart half their shipment of farming equipment to provide raw materials. The crew worked in shifts, following Tom's designs to build what he called dumb bombs, weapons so simple they were invisible to advanced detection systems. Mary's voice crackled over the intercom. "Captain, you need to see this. They're starting their attack on the Watson colony." Jack rushed back to the bridge, leaving Tom to his work. Through the main viewport, he watched as 3 massive Dominion ships surrounded the small mining colony. Their weapons weren't the expected energy beams or plasma torpedoes. Instead, they fired what looked like waves of light that simply shut down every modern system they touched. "They're using some kind of shutdown pulse," Pete said from his station, his voice tight with anger. "The colony's defense systems just went dark. Everything with a computer chip or quantum processor just died. But then something unexpected happened. As the colony's main systems failed, old emergency lights flickered to life. Ancient backup generators, kept around by stubborn colonists who never trusted the new technology completely, began to hum. The colony wasn't defenseless. It was adapting. Just like we thought, Jack said, a fierce smile on his face. They don't know how to handle the old stuff. Mary, send the coded message to the colony. Use the analog radio. Mary nodded, pulling out the handmade radio set Tom had built. It looked like something from a century ago, with actual turning dials and a physical microphone. She began transmitting in simple Morse code, knowing the colonists would still have equipment old enough to receive it. The message was simple. Hold out. Help coming. Old ways still work. Pete, bring us in closer, Jack ordered. Tom, is your surprise ready? Ready as it'll ever be, Cap. Tom's voice came through the intercom. Bill's got the cargo bay set up. Just get us in position. The Star Hauler crept forward, using minimal power. The massive Dominion ships towered over them like shining mountains, their attention focused on the colony. They never noticed the small cargo ship approaching from behind, dismissing it as another piece of disable technology. Now, Bill, Jack commanded. The cargo bay doors opened, releasing hundreds of small objects into space. To any advanced sensor, they would appear as nothing more than debris, pieces of metal and plastic floating harmlessly in the void. But each piece contained one of Tom's special surprises. The Dominion ships didn't react. Their sophisticated detection systems, programmed to watch for energy weapons and high-tech threats, completely ignored the cloud of space junk now surrounding them. On my mark, Jack said quietly, watching as the debris field spread out. 3, 2, 1. Tom threw the switch. Each piece of debris suddenly became a simple electromagnet, activated by basic electrical current. The field of makeshift mines attached themselves to the Dominion ships' hulls with loud clangs that echoed through space. The aliens finally noticed something was wrong, but their response came too late. Tom activated the second stage of his plan. The crude devices began vibrating at exactly the right frequency, one that interfered with the aliens' shield harmonics. It wasn't a sophisticated attack. It was just basic physics. Their shields are fluctuating, Pete reported, excitement in his voice. They can't maintain their shutdown field. The colony's old systems were already coming back online. Ancient defense turrets, built with simple hydraulics and mechanical computers, began tracking the Dominion ships. The aliens' sophisticated shields, designed to stop energy weapons and plasma shots, weren't calibrated to handle simple kinetic rounds. Send the second message, Jack ordered. Mary's fingers flew over her old radio set. Across the colony network, other ships and stations began receiving instructions, plans for Tom's makeshift weapons, frequencies for the old communication systems, and tactics for using outdated technology against the advanced invaders. The Dominion ships started to retreat, their perfect formations broken. Their command systems, fully automated and AI-controlled, couldn't adapt quickly enough to this primitive form of warfare. As they pulled back, more of Tom's magnetic devices attached to their hulls, disrupting their systems with simple mechanical vibrations. They're running, Pete shouted as the massive ships began to disappear into faster-than-light travel. They're actually running. But Jack knew this was just the beginning. Mary, broadcast on all frequencies, old and new. Tell every human ship and colony what we've learned. Tell them to dig out their old equipment, to remember the basic principles. The Dominion thinks we're primitive. Let's show them what primitive can do. The crew watched as their message spread. Across space, other human ships began powering down their advanced systems, returning to basics. Colony after colony began activating their old backup systems, preparing for the fight to come. The Star Hauler hung in space near Watson Colony, its battered hull now bearing fresh scars from the battle. Inside, Tom was already working on more weapons, while Bill sorted through their cargo for useful materials. Mary coordinated with other ships, teaching them how to use the old communication systems, and Pete plotted courses using nothing but stars and mathematical calculations. "Not bad for a primitive vessel," Jack said, patting his command chair. The star hauler might be old, might be simple, but she had just proved something important. Sometimes the oldest solutions were the best ones. The Dominion had built their entire invasion plan around defeating humanity's advanced technology. They never considered that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology at all. It was their ability to adapt, to improvise, and to remember the basic principles that had gotten them to the stars in the first place. As reports came in from other colonies and ships, Jack smiled. The Dominion had made a serious mistake. They had assumed that humanity's older technology was inferior, without realizing that every piece of advanced human technology was built on a foundation of those basic principles. By forcing humanity to go back to basics, they hadn't weakened them. They had reminded them of their strengths. The Star Hauler's crew gathered on the bridge, watching as more ships began to arrive, each one stripping down to its basic systems, each one ready to fight. The revolution had begun, not with advanced weapons or sophisticated strategies, but with simple machines and human ingenuity. And it had all started with one underestimated cargo ship that refused to be obsolete. The Dominion supply fleet moved through space like a glittering snake, 30 ships long. Their cargo holds were filled with fuel, spare parts, and ammunition for the main invasion fleet. They flew without escorts. After all, who would dare attack such advanced vessels? Hidden in the shadow of a small asteroid, the Star Hauler waited. She wasn't alone anymore. 4 other cargo ships floated nearby, each one modified according to Tom's designs. Their crews had stripped out most of their modern systems, replacing them with mechanical alternatives that were invisible to Dominion sensors. "Remember," Jack's voice crackled through the old-style radio network, "we hit them just like we planned. No fancy moves, no hero stuff. Simple physics and basic mechanics." The other ship captains acknowledged with clicks of their radios. They had practiced this attack for days, perfecting their timing. The Dominion's supply fleet was about to learn a harsh lesson about underestimating primitive vessels. "All ships, release drones," Jack ordered. From each human ship, dozens of small objects drifted into space. They looked like random pieces of metal, old satellite parts, chunks of hull plating, broken antenna arrays. But inside each piece, Tom's simple mechanical timers ticked away. The Dominion fleet passed directly through the field of debris. Their sensors, designed to detect energy weapons and advanced technology, didn't even register the scattered metal. The trap was set. "Now," Jack commanded. All at once, the pieces of space junk came to life. Small chemical rockets, technology so old it predated spaceflight, ignited, pushing the debris into calculated collision courses. The Dominion ship's automatic defense systems, programmed to stop energy weapons and missiles, didn't recognize the simple projectiles as threats until it was too late. Hundreds of impacts rattled the alien vessels. None of the hits were fatal, but they didn't need to be. The real attack came next. "Second wave," Jack called. "Mining ships, you're up." 2 converted mining vessels emerged from their hiding spots. Their cargo bays were filled with simple metal ball bearings, millions of them. As they approached the Dominion fleet, they began spinning, using centrifugal force to spray the bearings in wide arcs. Again, the aliens' sophisticated shields, designed to stop energy weapons, had no effect on the simple metal spheres. The balls damaged sensor arrays, cracked viewports, and clogged engine intakes. Several Dominion ships began to drift, their propulsion systems compromised by the most basic of weapons, small metal balls moving at high speed. "They're breaking formation," Pete reported from his navigation station. "Their fancy coordination systems can't handle this kind of damage." The Dominion fleet's response was predictable. They launched their defensive drones, sleek, AI-controlled machines designed to protect the fleet. But Tom had prepared for this too. "Release the nets," Jack ordered. The human ships launched their next surprise, literal fishing nets, modified with weights and simple electronic charges. The Dominion drones, programmed to dodge energy weapons and missiles, flew straight into the primitive traps. Their sophisticated sensors didn't register the simple metal and fiber nets until they were hopelessly tangled. "Main attack run," Jack called. "All ships, follow our lead." The Star Hauler led the charge, flying directly at the largest Dominion supply ship. They had removed most of their hull plating, making the ship lighter and more maneuverable. The remaining armor was angled like ancient tank armor, designed to deflect rather than absorb attacks. The Dominion ship fired its main weapons, devastating energy beams that could slice through modern shields. But the Star Hauler and her companions weren't using shields. They had covered their hulls with mirrors and reflective plates, another idea so simple it had caught the aliens completely off guard. Much of the energy weapon fire simply bounced off, scattering harmlessly into space. "Magnetic grapples," Jack ordered as they closed in. The human ships fired their grappling hooks, literally just electromagnets on the end of steel cables. The hooks latched onto the Dominion ships' hulls, and the human vessels used their momentum to swing around their targets like children playing a game of Maypole. "Tom, start the vibrations," Jack commanded. Each grappling cable began to vibrate at specific frequencies, sending shockwaves through the Dominion ships' hulls. It wasn't enough to destroy them, but it played havoc with their delicate internal systems. Quantum computers crashed, AI networks failed, and sophisticated targeting systems went haywire. The Dominion crews, too dependent on their automated systems, didn't know how to respond. Their training hadn't prepared them for enemies using such basic tactics. Some ships tried to jump to faster-than-light travel, but with their systems disrupted, they only managed to drift off course. "Bill, release the payload," Jack called to his cargo specialist. The Star Hauler's cargo bay opened, releasing hundreds of small pods. Inside each one was nothing more than water, frozen into ice. As the pods hit the Dominion ship's hot engine sections, the ice instantly vaporized into steam, causing rapid temperature changes that cracked delicate components. "Their engines are failing," Tom reported from engineering. "They can't maintain power with this kind of damage." The supply fleet was in chaos. Ships collided with each other as their automated collision avoidance systems failed. Others drifted helplessly, their engines crippled by the simplest of weapons: temperature changes and vibrations. "Mary, send the message," Jack ordered. "Let everyone know what happened here." Mary began broadcasting on the old radio frequencies, sending out news of their victory. But more importantly, she transmitted detailed instructions on how they had done it. Every human ship and colony would now know that the Dominion's mighty technology could be defeated with simple physics and basic mechanics. The remaining Dominion ships fled, leaving behind more than half their fleet floating dead in space. The human ships began recovery operations, using their magnetic grapples to tow the damaged alien vessels to nearby colonies for study. Inside the Star Hauler's bridge, the crew celebrated their victory. They had just proven that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their advanced technology. It was their ability to understand and use the basic principles that made that technology work. "Not bad for a bunch of primitives," Tom said, grinning as he looked at the sensor readings showing the extent of their victory. "The Dominion still thinks we're just getting lucky," Mary added, monitoring the alien communications. "They're calling this an unfortunate accident in their reports." Jack smiled. Let the Dominion keep underestimating them. Every victory like this gave other human ships and colonies time to prepare, time to remember the old ways that still worked. The aliens thought humanity would be helpless without their advanced technology, but they were wrong. Sometimes the oldest weapons were the best ones. Sometimes the simplest solutions were the most effective. And sometimes being underestimated was the greatest advantage of all. The Star Hauler and her companion ships turned toward home, leaving behind a graveyard of sophisticated alien vessels that had been defeated by nothing more complex than basic physics and human ingenuity. The legend of the primitive ships that could defeat the mighty Dominion was spreading, and with it, hope for humanity's survival. Word of the Star Haulers' victory spread across human space like wildfire. Every trading post, mining colony, and frontier station buzzed with stories about the old cargo ship that had found a way to fight back. But the Dominion wasn't sitting idle anymore. They had finally started to notice the primitive threat. "They're adapting," Mary reported from her communication station. She had rigged up an old radio telescope to intercept Dominion transmissions. "They're starting to shield their hulls against magnetic attacks." Jack nodded, studying the tactical display. The Star Hauler now led a fleet of 30 ships, each one modified according to Tom's ever-evolving designs. They weren't sleek or pretty. Most looked like flying junkyards, but they were effective. "Then we'll try something new," Jack said. "Tom, how's that project in the cargo bay coming along?" Tom's voice crackled through the intercom, accompanied by the sound of machinery. "Almost ready, Cap. Just finished testing it with Bill. You're going to love this one." The Star Hauler and her fleet hung in orbit around an abandoned mining asteroid. The massive rock's surface was covered with old equipment left behind when newer technology made the operation obsolete. For 3 days, they had been stripping it for parts, building something that even the other human ships thought was crazy. "Incoming transmission," Mary called out. "It's the Dominion. They're broadcasting on all frequencies again." The alien voice filled the bridge, its tone dripping with contempt. "Attention, primitive vessels. Your crude attacks have become an annoyance. Cease these futile efforts or face immediate destruction. Your obsolete technology cannot hope to." "Turn it off," Jack ordered. "I think we've all heard enough of their speeches." Pete looked up from his navigation controls. Multiple ships dropping out of faster-than-light travel. Looks like they sent a full battle group this time. Through the viewport, they watched as 12 Dominion warships appeared. Unlike the supply ships they had faced before, these were dedicated combat vessels. Their hulls gleamed with new armor designed to resist the humans' primitive weapons. "They think they've figured us out," Jack said with a smile. "Time to show them something different. All ships, execute Plan Thunder." The human fleet scattered, each ship flying in a different direction. To the Dominion's advanced sensors, it must have looked like they were retreating in panic. The alien ships moved to pursue, spreading out to chase down the fleeing vessels. "They took the bait," Pete reported. "They're splitting up just like we hoped." Jack keyed his radio. "Tom, you're on." Deep in the Star Hauler's cargo bay, Tom and Bill activated their latest creation. They had turned the entire cargo hold into one massive speaker system, using old mining equipment and salvaged parts. The principle was simple. Sound couldn't travel through space, but vibrations could travel through metal. "Broadcasting now," Tom reported. The Star Hauler began transmitting pure sound energy, converted into mechanical vibrations that ripple through space. Each human ship did the same, creating a complex web of overlapping waves. The Dominion ships, now scattered between them, found themselves caught in the crossfire. The aliens' new hull armor, designed to stop magnetic attacks, actually worked against them. The metal plating carried the vibrations perfectly, amplifying them throughout their ship's structures. Delicate instruments shattered, crystal computer cores cracked, and quantum processors failed under the assault. "It's working," Pete shouted. "Their systems are going crazy." The Dominion ships tried to retreat, but their formations were broken. Some ships crashed into each other as their navigation systems failed. Others fired weapons blindly, their targeting computers overwhelmed by the simple sound waves disrupting their circuits. "Phase 2, Jack ordered. "Bring in the miners." From behind the asteroid, 5 old mining ships appeared. Their drilling lasers, designed to cut through rock, had been modified with simple mirrors and lenses. The beams weren't powerful enough to penetrate the Dominion's energy shields directly, but they didn't need to. The mining lasers struck the clouds of metal dust that the human ships had been secretly releasing. The dust particles, heated by the lasers, turned into expanding clouds of plasma. The Dominion shields, calibrated to stop direct energy weapons, couldn't handle the randomly spreading energy clouds. "Their shields are failing," Mary reported. "They're trying to call for help, but our vibrations are disrupting their communications too." The human fleet pressed their advantage. Ships that had been fleeing turned back, now carrying makeshift weapons built from mining equipment and spare parts. They launched clouds of simple metal shavings that got sucked into the Dominion ships' engine intakes. They fired old harpoons that punctured fuel lines. They used electromagnetic pulses generated by nothing more complex than spinning magnets. "Half their fleet is disabled," Pete called out. "The others are starting to retreat." But the Dominion had one last surprise. Their flagship, larger than all the others, suddenly began to glow with energy. They were powering up some kind of super weapon, something that could vaporize the entire human fleet. "All ships, clear the area," Jack ordered. But then he smiled. "Except the Star Hauler. Tom, remember that old trick you used to use in the engine room? The one that got you fired from your last job?" Tom laughed over the intercom. "You mean the coolant redirect? Oh, this is going to be good." The Star Hauler turned to face the Dominion flagship directly. As the alien superweapon began to fire, Tom activated his makeshift defense. He had modified their engine coolant system to spray liquid nitrogen into space. The super-cold liquid froze instantly, creating a cloud of ice crystals right in the path of the energy beam. The beam struck the ice cloud and scattered, its energy dispersed by the simple frozen particles. The Dominion flagship's weapon overloaded, trying to compensate for the power loss. In moments, their own weapon had burned out their main power core. "Now that," Tom said proudly, "is what I call using your environment." The remaining Dominion ships fled, leaving their disabled companions behind. Once again, the mighty alien fleet had been defeated by nothing more complex than basic physics and creative thinking. As the human fleet began recovery operations, collecting disabled alien ships and rescued crew members, Jack looked around his bridge. The Star Hauler's crew was tired but proud. They had proven once again that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology. It was their understanding of how things worked at the most basic level. "Mary," Jack called, "send out the usual report. Let everyone know what we learned today." Soon, every human ship and colony would know about the sound weapon, the mining laser trick, and the ice cloud defense. The Dominion's sophisticated technology was being defeated by solutions so simple they seemed almost ridiculous. "They're still calling us primitive," Mary said, monitoring the alien communications. "They still don't understand what's really happening." "Good," Jack replied. "Let them keep thinking that. Because every time they underestimate us, every time they dismiss our primitive solutions, they make the same mistake. They forget that all their advanced technology is built on the same basic principles we're using against them." The Star Hauler led her fleet toward home, her battered hull now wearing its scars with pride. She wasn't primitive. She was foundational. And she had just helped teach the galaxy a lesson it wouldn't soon forget. The Star Hauler's bridge was crowded now. Besides the regular crew, captains from 20 other ships had gathered to plan their final stand. Through the viewport, they could see the massive Dominion Armada gathering, nearly 100 ships, including their newest anti-primitive vessels. "They're done playing around," Jack said, pointing to the tactical display. "This time they're coming with everything they have." The gathered captains nodded grimly. The Dominion had finally realized the true threat posed by humanity's primitive fleet. Their new ships carried special armor that dampened vibrations, shields calibrated to stop simple projectiles, and hulls designed to resist temperature changes. "So they think they've figured us out," Tom said, stepping forward. His hands were black with grease, and he carried a strange device cobbled together from old engine parts. "Good thing we got something new for them." He set the device on the tactical table. It looked like junk, just pipes and valves connected to a pressure gauge. But Tom's eyes gleamed with excitement as he explained his latest idea. "They're expecting us to use sound waves, magnets, and ice again," he said. "But they forgot about one of the oldest forces in the universe, steam. The plan was audacious, even by their standards. Every human ship had spent the last week converting their water reserves into specially designed steam systems. They weren't going to fight the Dominion with fancy weapons. They were going to fight them with the same technology that had powered humanity's first industrial revolution. Earth Defense Fleet is still 12 hours away, Mary reported from her station. We have to hold until they arrive. Jack looked at each captain in turn. We're the only thing standing between the Dominion and Earth's core systems. They think they've learned how to handle primitive weapons. Let's show them what primitive really means. The captains returned to their ships, each one knowing their role in the coming battle. The Star Hauler led them into position behind a field of space debris, wreckage from previous battles that would provide cover for the first phase of their plan. Dominion fleet is advancing, Pete called out. They're moving cautiously this time. The alien ships moved in perfect formation, their new armor gleaming. They were ready for every trick the humans had used before, but they weren't ready for what came next. All ships release the clouds, Jack ordered. Every human vessel vented water into space through specially designed nozzles. The liquid froze instantly, creating massive clouds of ice crystals. The Dominion ships pressed forward, their new shields easily deflecting the frozen particles. They took the bait, Tom said with a grin. Phase 2, Captain. Jack nodded. Light them up. Hidden mining lasers activated, striking the ice clouds from multiple angles. But instead of trying to damage the Dominion ships directly, the beams were precisely calibrated to turn the ice into steam. Within seconds, the alien fleet was surrounded by expanding clouds of superheated vapor. Their new armor can handle vibrations, Tom explained proudly, but it still conducts heat. And steam. Steam gets everywhere. The superheated vapor found every crack and seam in the Dominion ship's armor. It carried simple but destructive particles, salt, minerals, and metal dust that Tom had mixed into the water before freezing it. As the steam penetrated their ships, it left behind corrosive residue that played havoc with their delicate systems. They're breaking formation, Pete reported, moving to Phase 3. The human fleet split into smaller groups, each one targeting a different section of the Dominion armée. They had stripped their ships down even further, removing everything that wasn't essential. Every spare bit of mass had been converted into Tom's newest weapons, simple steam-powered rams. The Star Hauler led the charge, steam jets firing from improvised rocket nozzles. They didn't need complex fuel or precise calculations, just heated water turning to vapor, providing thrust through basic physics. The Dominion ships, their systems struggling with the steam and corrosion, couldn't track the erratic movements of the primitive vessels. Impact in 3, 2, 1. Jack called out. The reinforced bow of the Star Hauler struck a Dominion vessel's engine section. The ram wasn't powered by explosives or energy weapons, just steam pressure and kinetic force. The alien ship's sophisticated armor, designed to resist energy attacks, crumpled under the simple impact. All across the battlefield, human ships struck like ancient naval vessels, ramming their targets with steam-powered precision. The Dominion fleet's perfect formations dissolved into chaos as they tried to defend against attacks that belonged in history books. Their flagship is powering up their main weapon, Mary warned. Perfect. Jack smiled. Tom, show them your grand final. Tom activated his final surprise. Every disabled Dominion ship they had captured in previous battles had been stripped down and converted into massive steam bombs. Now, hidden among the debris field, they all activated at once. The explosions weren't from plasma or antimatter. They were simply from superheated steam released all at once, carrying clouds of conductive metal particles. The Dominion flagship's energy weapon fired directly into this cloud. The beam's energy was caught and reflected by countless tiny particles, creating a storm of lightning-like discharges that overwhelmed their shields. Earth Defense Fleet just dropped out of faster than light, Pete announced triumphantly. They're engaging the Dominion's rear forces. Caught between Earth's advanced warships and the primitive fleet that had proved so devastatingly effective, the Dominion Armada began to retreat. Ships disappeared into faster-than-light travel, many of them damaged or malfunctioning from the simple but deadly attacks. The Star Hauler's bridge crew watched as the mighty alien fleet fled. Their own ships were battered, their hulls scarred, but they had achieved what the Dominion had thought impossible. They had proven that understanding basic principles was more valuable than having advanced technology. "Send the message," Jack ordered quietly. "Let everyone know that Earth is safe." Mary began broadcasting on all frequencies, using everything from modern quantum communications to simple radio waves. The word spread quickly. The Dominion had been defeated not by superior technology, but by steam, physics, and human ingenuity. Hours later, as repair crews worked to patch up their battle damage, Jack stood in the Star Hauler's cargo bay with his crew. Engineers from Earth Defense Fleet were examining Tom's steam weapons with amazement, taking notes on how simple mechanics had defeated the galaxy's most advanced technology. "They're already talking about putting the Star Hauler in a museum," Mary said, reading from a message from Earth Command. "A museum." Tom looked offended. "She's not done yet. There's still so much more we can do with her. I've got this idea about using pulleys and counterweights." The crew laughed, but they knew he was right. The Star Hauler wasn't a relic to be preserved. She was a reminder that the simplest solutions were often the best ones. She had taught humanity a lesson they wouldn't forget. True strength didn't come from having the most advanced technology, but from understanding how things worked at their most basic level. As the Earth Defense Fleet began securing the system, the Star Hauler and her crew prepared for their next mission. There would be more battles, more challenges, more chances to prove that being primitive wasn't a weakness. It was a strength. Because sometimes the oldest tools were the best ones. Sometimes the simplest solutions were the most effective. And sometimes being underestimated was the greatest advantage of all.